On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Saturday morning conversations around the science of mind. I'm Reverend Mark Gilbert, and I'm so happy to be with you this morning again. I love doing these shows, going deeper with our philosophy of the science of mind, and hope that you enjoy these as well. We just want to give a shout out and welcome to all of you who are watching live. If you are, be sure to post your comments and notes in the field where you can do that, so we'll know that you're here. And off and on, I do want to make this a conversation. So as you have something coming up on you or in your mind regarding what we're talking about, feel free to put that in the chat. And so we can go back and forth on that a little bit. This week, we are doing the second part of our presentation on the general summary of the Science of Mind textbook. It's pages 390 to 423, 390 to 423. What we decided a while back was it's a fairly long section of the book, and so we said, let's do 2 weeks on that. And last week, Reverend Victoria did a wonderful delve into the general summary, and this week I'm going to pick up on that and continue it. Only I'm going to take a different approach. What I really loved about Victoria's presentation last week was she went through and highlighted several of the quotes from Holmes in the general summary and delved deeper into them. What I want to do this morning is back up and go through it in a much more high-level overview of the summary itself. For all of the weeks of this year, we've been going through the Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, chapter by chapter, looking at what he's talking about and conversing about it. And the general summary is towards the end of the book. Next week, we'll actually, Laura Tapa will be with you, and we'll be looking at some of the metaphysical charts that are in the back of the book and discussing those. And there's a number of other things in the back of the book that we haven't gotten to that I'm not sure we're going to be doing in this series, but the series will continue even if we have completed this book, because we're going to continue looking at some other material of Science of Mind, and more on that to come in the weeks ahead. But this morning, what I really want to do is to take a look at this summary, because what Ernest Holmes was doing here was saying, okay, I've written this vast book with all this content in it, and now we're going to summarize it in these 33 pages. And in that summary, he winds around talking about a lot of stuff. But if you back up and look at it from a high level, you'll see that he's actually really is summarizing the flow of the general book. It might not read that way, or at least to me, it didn't read that way the first few times I read the summary. But I want you to tie this summary to the overall flow of the book. And in my prior weeks when I've been with you, every time I've had a chapter, I tried to say, where is this chapter in the overall flow of the Science of Mind textbook? And in that, what I've pointed out is that if you look at the general table of contents of the book, there's the introductory chapters, that are an overview of the philosophy. But then when you get into the main parts of the book, there is the following general flow of three broad areas. the first that Ernest talks about, the first chapters and sections of the book are really about the philosophy itself. What is the underpinnings of what it is we believe about life and through the science of mind philosophy. So the first section is philosophical. Then the next sections get into how to use it. And that's the practical aspect of science of mind treatment, affirmative prayer work, and things of that nature that are working to take what we've applied in the theory and put it into practice in our life. And the final section of the textbook is really getting to the deeper metaphysical, spiritual aspects of it, the mystical nature. I call it the mystical part of the book, because he's really taking us on that step to where we're going. And so that's the three sections of the book. And it dawned on me when I was reading through the general summary for today's presentation and discussion that's how the general summary is organized as well. I'm going to give you some rough page numbers. If you want to jot these down, you might want to, and come back and just check me on it. And because when I go through some of the key points in this chapter, I want you to see that he really is flowing from theory to practice to mysticism. And that's a natural flow. The theory sections, we could roughly label them pages 390 to 395 is where he's talking about theory. And I'm going to run through eight points with you that I think he's making in that section. So 390 to 395 is the theory. Around 395, 396, he starts morphing into the practice, how to apply the theory. And that goes from maybe 396 to around page 409. And around 409, he starts melding into his call to us to see the philosophy from a mystical standpoint. And the rest of the section from pages 410 on to 422 are really on mystical stuff. Each of those sections has some key points that I want to sort of brief you with, lay them out for you and see how they resonate with you and maybe tie it into some of the quotes. If I read all the quotes that I highlighted in the book, we'd probably be here for several hours, and we don't want to do that. And I do want to get your comments as well. But that's the general flow that we're going to be going through. What's the theory? How do we use it? And the mysticism. And that's a natural progression for our lives if we stop and think about it. If you think about how you found this philosophy or how you developed your spiritual beliefs, that there was certainly this question that was in you, and you looked around in life and you're saying, what does life mean for me? You're putting together sort of a mental map of how the universe works and making sense of everything. And so when you approach everything, you sort of look at it and say, well, what do these people believe? What is the core essence of their beliefs? And so you come to every philosophy with that sort of question on your mind. And you also come from a need standpoint. You may be, where are you in your life? Are you needing healing over relationships, prosperity, money, jobs, career, et cetera? Is there stuff in the world going on that you're trying to address? Or is there some spiritual question out there? And a lot of people come to philosophies out of certain, material needs or spiritual needs, and then look for the philosophy to meet their needs in that level, and then apply it. They start applying it. But eventually, after they've applied it and it's successful, if it doesn't work for them, if it doesn't resonate or it doesn't work, you go off and quest somewhere else. But if you found that the science of mind resonated with you and you understood and followed the philosophy and applied the techniques, then all of a sudden your material world needs seem to be met at a level that's basic and has no question for you. And you get into the next level. You can think of it sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where your base needs are met and you're working up into self-actualization and self-transcendence. And at those higher level of needs, you're just naturally called to spiritual needs. And that's where the mysticism piece comes in. And I think Holmes was very brilliant to say, here's the philosophy, here's how you use it. And then once you practice it, you're naturally going to want to walk into the mystical aspects of it. So let's dive into the question of the book and get into it. And again, if you're here with us, I would love for you to be sure to post your comments and let us know that you're here, and love that you're being with us this week. So I want to just say, we're looking first at the first pages that are really dealing with theory. And there are 7 or 8 key points that I think that Holmes makes in this section. The very first one is laying out the fact that under the science of mind, everything in this universe is mind. It's consciousness. And I think if you're in the philosophy, you know this, but that's the reason he points that out initially, because this is such a key change from what most people in the world are looking at. They either have a worldview that says, yes, there's a spiritual nature of a God externally, and God, old man in the sky God, or they're in a denial that there is a God, and they feel like everything is matter, it's physical stuff. So what we're trying to do is to shift that orientation right off the back, or Holmes is, by saying that all is mind. In fact, he says in the very first page here, the mind of God is infinite. The mind of man is some part of the infinite creative mind of God. Therefore, the mind of man is infinite, as is man's capacity to understand his true relationship. Spirit is really the only mind there is. God is spirit, that is, without parts, a universal unity and wholeness. God is mind. He's shifting our orientation that everything is mind, all is mind. The second point that he makes in this summary is that our mind is really the use of this one mind. That when we think we have our mind, that we're walking around with mind in our head, he wants us to see that our mind is really the use of this one mind in which we're swimming and moving and having our very being. Okay, that's the second point. And the third point is that we are individualized expressions of the one. That we feel the sense of individual, and we have an individualized nature, so that we're walking around with freedom and free will choice and so forth, but we're part of the oneness of all the mind. Okay, so all is mind, that our mind is simply a use of the one mind, and there were individualized expressions in this one. And the quotes there and the sections on the first couple of pages really are getting in at that. The third point that he makes, the fourth point rather, is that mind can be both conscious or subconscious or subjective. That we make use of this mind, this one mind, but it has two natures to it. There is a conscious level where we're aware, we can make choices, etc. But there's a subjective level below the level of awareness that we can touch into, and that this subjective area is universal and creative, and that we tap into it. We're tapping into a universal nature that exists in everything that is. That this universal subjective mind is bigger than just us. Our conscious awareness may seem localized in us, but our subjective nature just is naturally interconnected with all of the one big mind. And that it's the creative aspect that is where our conscious thoughts are flowing through that subjective mind, and that's where we are actually making our creative expression is occurring. As we get over onto page 392, the philosophy continues with his sixth point, that this mind, which has both a conscious level and a subjective level, that this mind is actually on a continuum from finer and higher consciousness down to denser and more less vibratory substance or matter. So we can think of being in the world of non-matter, in the world of matter, the world of mind or consciousness, in the world of form, that we have this continuum that we are moving through, that there is, up at the highest levels of spirit and consciousness, it is vibrating and is such at a level that all is mind, and it's mind in its non-form aspect. But that as it sinks down and flows into form, that our thoughts and the creative aspect of the subjective mind creates them into forms that are temporary. So mind exists on this continuum. That's the sixth point I really think he's making here, is that it exists in an unformed substance, and then it exists into denser forms. All right. And that the seventh point he makes is that forms are not permanent. They're only temporary states where the mind is expressing itself. So everything in this world is a temporary state of form that is an expression of mind. Okay, so then, it's easy to say, well, is this an illusion? Because Some philosophies, indicate that, matter and substance in the world is an illusion. When that question was put to Ernest Holmes, he said, the world is real as form. And what did he mean by that? He meant that our consciousness is flowing into a state of form, that we give order to what is being expressed, that our conscious thoughts and the thoughts and aspects of spirit with the creation of the universe allowed this place to be an expression of spirit. So it's real as form, but it will it will dissolve and return back into, this liquid substance of mind, to ever be making this circle from a swirling aspect of consciousness and unformed substance that is thought into the forms of life. Okay, so that's his 7th point. Let's read a couple of quotes here on page 393. A couple of quotes. I'm just jumping around to give you the sense of the points he's making here. He says, the invisible essence of mind is substance. The invisible essence of mind is substance. That is an unformed stuff, an energy. It is energy plus intelligence. Energy and intelligence in this non-formed substance. And then he goes on at the bottom of that page to say, no form is permanent. All forms return into the formless. The formless is eternal. All form is temporary. There is an eternal play of life upon itself. This is necessary in order that mind may be expressed. Man is an expression of original mind, and he can call temporary forms into being if he wills to. Indeed, he cannot stop doing this, and thereby hangs the tale of good and evil. And so namaste to our viewer, and we're grateful for you being here as well. Again, for any questions, comments, commentary, please post them in the comment field so that I can see them. The nature here is that, and just to get the philosophy anchored in our awareness, everything's mind. We're swimming in an ocean of mind. What we think is our mind is simply a use of the one mind. That the aspect of that we think that we're individual, but we're parts of the unity. So we have this dual nature, that we are individualized expressions, but we're really part of the oneness. That our conscious awareness is where we can consciously choose and use our free will thoughts, but that it's the subjective mind, the other aspect of mind, that is the creative nature that acts upon our thoughts. That mind is a continuum from unformed substance into forms, and that it is these forms are temporary, and they dissolve and return to the not formless state, and that eventually what we get to the key point in the philosophy is that when you lay all of that out, you start thinking, well, gee, my thoughts have a creative power. My thoughts have a creative power. And so the basic idea of the science of mind is about understanding this philosophy and the fact of learning to use the creative ability of our thoughts, the creative ability of our objective mind, to then flow into and be worked upon by our subjective minds to create and bring into form those things that we want, to act on substance to create the lives that we want. Yes, my thoughts have creative power. That is the key teaching of the philosophy. All these other pendings of understanding all this mind, the conscious mind, subjective mind, etc., is all to bring us to the understanding that we are here as individualized expressions of that one, and have this power to use our creative thoughts to manifest into form the world that we want. So what is it that we want? Do we want health, relationships, the perfect job? All of those are forms that we can bring into being as a play of the spirit. Spirit wants us to express our free will nature so that we can express ourselves through this entire universe. That's the purpose of the universe, is for us to express as spirit, as these individualized expressions of the one. And that's why we're here. Which then brings us into the next section of the book, which is really about how to use this. Once you understand the underpinnings and the very fact that your thought has creative power, then how can you use this? Well, the very first thing he talks about over on page 396 is that we need to learn to give thoughts direction. That's the very first how-to. Give direction to your thoughts. Now, that's different from where we normally are walking around in life. We normally think that, oh, I think a thought, I think a thought, I think a thought. They're just ping-ponging all over the place. And when we have ping-pong thoughts that are left and right and up and down, then we get its manifestations left and right and up and down. We get this ping-pong reality of our existence that seems to have no rhyme or reason to it. The very first thing he wants us to do is to give direction. He says on 396, mind as law is helpless without direction. It has nowhere to go or nothing to do of itself. Then he shouts at us in all caps, it must be directed or it will do nothing of permanent worth for us. So the very first how-to is give direction. So we have to start thinking, well, where do I want to go if I'm giving it direction? Instead of seeing our thoughts as something that happened to us, it's done to us, we now have control. So we can control and give direction to our thoughts. That's the first how-to. The second one is to then give what he calls special mental attention, acceptance, and realization to our thoughts. Mental attention, acceptance, and realization. Here's a few quotes from him, and then I'll elaborate. He says on 397, the universal mind in a subjective state is what we mean by the law of mind. The only concentration necessary in the best use of mind, and again, mind is everything. The only concentration necessary in the best use of mind is specific mental attention and complete mental acceptance. So he's saying, give attention to what it is you want. That's that direction piece. Put your attention on what it is that you desire. And then have a mental acceptance that it's going to occur. Have an acceptance that it's going to occur. He says on 398, acceptance and realization are mental qualities and may be consciously generated. When we treat, we should be specific. And our mental acceptance should be filled with conviction, warmth, color, and imagination. The creative power responds to feeling more quickly than to any other mental attitude. And Roy asked, does that mean we have the power to bless and heal through prayer? Yes, we do. And that's where this is all heading. This is where we are all heading. It's like we have to first come to it, and we essentially move through it in stages, Roy. It's like when we first all become aware that our thoughts have creative power, then we start, putting our toe in the water and testing a little bit and say, oh, well, maybe it does. Maybe it does. Now, sometimes people will jump all in and then prove to themselves, they didn't really think it would work. And then what they get is that, oh, it didn't work because their thoughts were that it wasn't going to work. But the more that we can have that acceptance, we put mental attention and then have an acceptance that it's going to happen and start seeing it in its reality. That takes us to the next step, Now, do we have the power to bless? Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by blessing other than seeing the God nature in something else and seeing the divinity in it. And yes, we all have the ability to do that, to see the good in it and to say that I want the good for that. It's like if I bless you on your day, what do I mean by that? It means that, I want you to have the best day you can. I want you to have a glorious life expression. I want you as an individualized expression of this one that we're all dancing in. I want you to have the blessings and goodness of the life. In the world of form, I want the experiences that you have in form to be good. And then one of those blessings is when we see something out of whack, somebody is suffering with something like an illness, that we want that blessing to encourage or to move towards their state of being of wholeness and completeness and health and vitality. And so, yes, we have the power to bless and to heal through our thoughts. But it's I say yes, but I want you to know there's a lot of caveats there, because the caveats can come up in our own awareness when we argue with ourselves and we don't have acceptance of it. Oh, who am I to, indicate or move towards a healing for you? And that there's also the other consciousness that's being thought into the one mind. And so sometimes we are being impacted by the collective consciousness of the universe and humanity. Sometimes we're, our consciousness and the healing ability we have may be to a degree thwarted by the consciousness of others who are thinking something else. So our thoughts have power, and they include the power to bless and to heal ourselves and others. And the more that we can have that realization, the more that we can give power to it. But we're also swimming in a sea of ocean of other individualized expressions who are also thinking into this one mind and can have different thoughts. Instead of begging God, do we have the power to bless and heal? Yeah, and one of the things about science of mind is, when we shift very back to the very first point, all is mind, we're saying God's not something outside of us. God's something that's in everything. And the old beseeching kind of prayer to an external God is the begging aspect. And what science of mind says is let go of all of that. What we're moving to is an awareness that the divinity of the divine God, spirit, infinite intelligence is in us. We're swimming in that, and that we can tap into that power. So we're not beseeching an external God to do something, to bless and to heal, or whatever it is that we're desiring. What we're doing is directing our thoughts into this consciousness of the one mind of God to see the manifestation that we desire. And when we look and change our orientation to that direction, we recognize there's no need to beseech. The only beseeching is for us to change our thinking and to give direction and power to our thoughts. So let's let go of the old beseeching external God and see that we all have this divine power within us. The third how-to that Holmes gets into over on page 400 is that he says we must train our thought. We must train our thought. Yes, we have given direction to it. Yes, we recognize that we have to be specific. We have to have acceptance of what it is. We have to have a realization. The realization is realizing that whatever it is that we're desiring is manifesting now. We have to have that realization. But we argue with ourselves. I can sit in affirmative prayer. I can sit in meditation and say, I'm affirming that, I am letting go of whatever this health challenge is, and I'm having perfect health. And then I get out of the meditation chair and then, this ache, this pain, what the doctor said, blah, blah, blah. I whine to my friends about, all of the, the ailments that I have. Same thing. I am prosperity and abundance are coming to me. I am rich and everything that I need is in my life. And then I whine to my friends about, my bills and my lack and poverty or whatever it is. My thoughts are inconsistent. So Holmes says we must train our thoughts. We must train our thoughts. He says over on page 402, for example, thoughts of lack, poverty, and limitation contain within themselves the conditions necessary to produce lack, poverty, and limitation. As long as we're thinking on those things that are less than what we want, we're going to continue getting those no matter how much we also are affirming. So we have this argument in our minds, in our awareness, and we debate whether or not we have the power to create what it is that we desire. And so that gets into the third point over on 404. The fourth one in terms of how to use it. How to use it, once we understand that we need to train our thoughts and be consistent, is that we start having a lack of faith. We have fear. We have fear that can we really do this? And Roy, you're asking, last Sunday in church, I heard that we can haggle with God. Not so. Who are we haggling with? Who is God? God is all that is. Who are we haggling with in that? It's our nature to want to, humanize God into some external something that we can argue with. But when we're doing that, we're really arguing with the divinity within us. We're arguing with the flow that's moving through us. We can change when we recognize that the only haggling we have to do is with ourselves, changing our own conversation with ourselves and what we're putting into the one mind, then there's no need to haggle. But it's easy. Let me say it's easy because we've been so ingrained with the external God outside me that I got to beseech or haggle with. It's easy to slip back into that old way because it's embedded in all of us. And we're still training ourselves to have faith in the power that God is within us. So it's okay sometimes when we fall back, but let's quicker and quicker and quicker move to the space of having faith. Because what we're doing when we haggle with God or beseech or beg or whatever is we're having fear that maybe we don't have the ability to create our lives. We have this fear that, and what is the fear? Fear is lack of faith of this divinity within us. So what do we need to do? We need to move from having fear to faith. To faith. That's one of the key steps that Holmes talks about in the pages 404 to 405, is really moving us from fear that we do not have this divine aspect within us that we can use. Let's think about it. If I'm on the hook for my thoughts, it's easy for me to blame God out there for my life than it is for me to take responsibility. That's just our human nature sometimes, is to look for a scapegoat. I'm going to scapegoat God out there for giving me a crappy life. When really, who's responsible? When I take responsibility, I understand that I have the responsibility, that I can change my thoughts. And so I have to move from that old way of thinking. That's moving from fear to faith. Fear that, that life is being done to me, to the faith that I have the ability to create the life that I want. Yes, as Wayne says, lighting the candle of spiritual knowledge is what we're doing here, moving towards that spiritual knowledge, moving towards the old way and evolving in our consciousness to the new way. So 404 to 405, we're moving from fear to faith, but over on 406 is another how-to, is that we've got to develop a conscious knowing and love of spirit, a conscious knowing and love of spirit. He says on page 407, Holmes says, to believe in life is to believe in the invisible. What he's really getting at is we've gone from fear to faith, but now we've got a faith to knowing. There's a difference between having faith and simply knowing. And what Holmes has written on these 4 pages is taking us on a continuum in our consciousness from being fearful and doubtful and knowing, really questioning how life is and it's being done to us, to having faith that we have the ability to create our lives, and then moving from faith to knowing. And if you can feel that difference, if you can really feel into it, that having faith is sort of a mental, I know it, and knowing is simply, you accept it, you realize it, it's just the way it is. And we're moving into that aspect of just having faith that the divinity is working through us, that we have aspect to that one mind, that we have the creative ability. And it's, he says over on 408, man's consciousness of God constitutes his real and immortal self. He says, our consciousness of God is our real self, and at the same time, it is both personal and impersonal. We have to move to knowing and loving God as ourselves. We have to feel into that God's, and it's a gradual thing for us. We move from the external God out there to the God in me. And the more we do that, we move from this life is being done to me, to being done by me, to being done through me, and finally as me. That I am anchored in and so melded into God that I love myself and love my God is in a joint love, that there is a dance of love between myself and the spirit of the divine. But it's a process to get there. It's a process to get there. It's moving out of fear to faith. It's moving from faith to knowing that we are the divine, and that everything that we interact with is an expression of the divine, that we dance in that love. We dance in that love. So that brings us to the final how-to over on 409. He says, we must see ourselves as divine and perfect. We must see ourselves as divine and perfect. And when we do that, when we start seeing the divine perfection in ourselves and in every other person, this is a true shift. And I hope you see this movement on a continuum from putting our toe in the water to testing this philosophy, to moving to a state of really knowing ourselves as perfect and divine, and that we are swimming in this divine oneness. That is a process we move through. And Holmes recognized that. And when we get to that place of that divine oneness and that divine perfection, perfect man, perfect being, when we live in that space, we can't help but move into seeing the truth of our mystical nature of life. Which brings us to the final section of this book, where he gets into this aspect. And he says we are called to develop and evolve our mystical oneness. That's where we're going. We're moving into the mystical. He says over on page 411, Holmes writes, the relationship between the individual and the universal mind is one of reflection. That is, what we image for ourselves, it images to us. And so one of the first things we do in this mystical state is to acknowledge that our thoughts are like a mirror being reflected back to us, and that the divine in this perfect dance is mirroring back to us the life of our choice. He says we can sit in the shade or move into the sunshine. I don't know about you, but I want to go into the sunshine. This divine reflects back to us the life that we want. And as we do that, we start moving into this mystical state. Over on 413, he writes that we are always called to an awareness of God within us. Always. He writes, to practice the presence of God is to awaken us to the Christ consciousness. Christ is God in the soul of man. Now, this is a switch for us in terms of, coming out of the traditional religions and where we think Christ is the last name of Jesus, to recognizing that Christ is the aspect of the consciousness of the divine in us. That we have this Christ nature in us. Everything has this Christ nature within it. Every person we meet has this Christ consciousness within it. And when we reach these mystical states of oneness, we look around at every expression, and we see the divinity within them. We see this Christ consciousness within them. He says on 413, in mental treatment, we should feel as the whole power of the universe were running through the words we speak, because we know we are in this dance of oneness. To practice the presence of the divine in others is to practice mental healing, for it is the recognition of the divine presence which heals. We're letting go of any thoughts that I'm doing anything. I'm simply using the power that is available in everybody and seeing that oneness and just allowing it to flow. He writes on 414 that thoughts are more than things, they are the cause of things. We have to anchor that into who we are and what we know. On 415, he says, no good can come to us unless we make its advent through the center of God consciousness, which we are. Question for you and me is, are we anchored in that divinity? Do we know and feel and sense the Christ consciousness within us? I mentioned earlier that we come to this philosophy where we are. Sometimes we're hurting in the world of form, and we start looking for meaning, and we test the waters, and we start saying, well, okay, life was being done to me, but now maybe I can control life and be done as me, or through me, rather. And as I try to have life done by me, I get a sense of power and control, but I move from fear to faith. I start having more and more faith, and then I see that life is done through me. But as I move into this mystical nature of oneness, I'm just simply life. I'm simply the divine. Roy is the divine. Wayne is the divine. Everybody who is listening to these words is the divine. And we are dancing in this, and we are simply all co-creating this experience. We're either doing it consciously or we're not. We're either giving direction to our thoughts or we're not. We're either creating and manifesting the life that we so choose and think that we choose, or we're not. But eventually, we evolve. And that is one of the key aspects of this book for me. And he talks about this over on page 417. He says, we may be sure that the whole aim of evolution is to produce innumerable cells which are all consciously centered in the universal self. Let me read that again. We may be sure that the whole aim of evolution, and what is evolution? Let's let go of the limited thing that's Darwinianism and just the physical nature. We're talking about a broader evolution where consciousness is evolving as well. What's evolving? You and I are. We may sure the whole aim of evolution is to produce innumerable selves, you and me and everybody on this planet, which are all consciously centered in the universal self. Imagine a life in a world where we're all centered in that universal self, where we all know that we are all one, that we all want the best for one another. It would break down the barriers and the competition. It would break down the fears and the doubts. It would move us to a state of love and care and concern. Yes. Holmes writes over in 419 that when we become that which we might call a mystic, that a mystic is one who intuitively perceives truth, that you just intuitively know. A mystic is one who intuitively perceives truth and who, without conscious mental process, arrives at spiritual realization. It's really a shifting of our attention. A lot of times our attention and focus is on this world around us. It's very mesmerizing. We see what's going on in the world of form, and we want to give that the ultimate reality. And as our attention and a focus is on what's in the world, we get more of what's in the world. But where evolution is taking us is to remember and so our truth and our oneness of our nature. And then we are back to this continuum that I talked about earlier, where the world of form is just, it's manifest substance, but the substance dissolves back into its nature of being liquid mind. And there it's acted upon again through our conscious thoughts to create the world of form. So sometimes we have to shift our attention. And that's why spiritual practices are so important for us. That we have to shift away from focusing on what's in front of us, this world, to shifting our attention to what's the truth. The truth is that we're all one, that we're all divine, that we can shift our thoughts into this world, this liquid mind world of oneness, and recognize that through our thoughts, we can bring into form that which we want to create. But as long as we're focused and that our attention is on the world of form, that's what we get. So the call for every one of us is to enhance our spiritual practices, to tap into the divinity, to move into oneness in our recognition of who we are, to shift up into the continuum, into the non-formed substance of mind, to see and taste the love and harmony and peace of the divinity. Holmes writes, all the mystics have recognized the absolute unity of God and man. Everything is one. He writes over on 420, by cosmic consciousness, we mean one's consciousness of his unity with the whole. Evolution is taking us to a state of cosmic consciousness, each and every one of us. Yes, we see many people out there in the world of form who are mired in the world of form, who recreate that world over and over. But you can be a beacon of light. You can move in your awareness by understanding the principles that he teaches here and that we practice, and through the techniques of focusing our attention and our thoughts to create the world that we desire. But it's going to take you and I and many, many more pockets of consciousness to shift upwards, to focus less on the negativity we see in the world and focus into our awareness of the possibilities, the infinite possibilities of what we can create. The white light universe, as Wayne writes in his comment. We can tap into that universe and see the truth and bring it into form. On 422, at the conclusion of this chapter, Holmes writes, each maintains a stream of consciousness in the one mind, and anyone contacting this stream may objectify it. Because of the universality of the medium, the individual stream of consciousness is always omnipresent, whether the one from whom it emanated be in the flesh or out of it. Time and space are unknown in mind. We live in a constant stream of unformed substance, consciousness, We have the creative ability through our attention, through our focus, through our acceptance and realization, through the training of our thoughts, by moving from fear to faith, and faith to knowing, and developing within us a consciousness of the oneness, of recognizing the Christ consciousness within us, or recognizing through the experience of cosmic consciousness that we are all one. By moving in this evolutionary arc, you and I are growing on our spiritual paths, and we are all creating a world that will work for everybody. We all have this ability. We conclude today with reading page 423, which is entitled Final Conclusion. So here are the words of Ernest Holmes as we conclude. In conclusion, what the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principle than to have him repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it. But the practice of truth is personal to each. And in the long run, no one can live our life for us. To each is given what he needs, and the gifts of heaven come alike to all. How we shall use these gifts is all that matters. To hold one's thoughts steadfastly to the constructive, to that which endures, and to the truth may not be as easy in a rapidly changing world, but to the one who makes the attempt, much is guaranteed. The essence of spiritual mind healing and of all true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within and around about. It is the hope of heaven, the voice of God proclaiming, I am that which thou art that which I am. Peace, love, and blessings. Thanks for all of you for enjoying or joining in. I hope you enjoyed joining in today. I hope this was beneficial. And if you're watching on the video, thank you for watching as well. Thank you. Peace.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.